Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of the Quietly Confident Introvert with your host, Patience Ogunbona. I'm so excited that you're joining me today. If you have always been a listener, I appreciate you. And if you're just joining for the first time, I'm so glad that you found me and that you found this podcast. And I'm looking forward to adding value to you. This is a podcast where we empower introverted women in business and leadership to build quiet confidence, to harness their introvert strengths, and to develop an aligned and authentic pathway to holistic success. So, whether that is in your career or in your business, I'm looking forward to adding value to you. And today, we're continuing with doing that by discussing a topic that I know that you'll find interesting. We're going to be talking about how introverts can heal their inner child and develop your strengths as a result of experiencing that healing. And not only will I be doing that, I'll be bringing along a special guest today. My special guest today is Pauline Toussaint. Now, before we came on board, we were talking about how do I pronounce the name, and I was thinking I've been learning a bit of French, and I know it's a French surname. Should I go ahead and try it in French? But I'm not going to do that. I will let her come on board and talk about herself more. But just as a brief introduction, Pauline serves as a transformational coach and trained psychotherapist, and her mission is to guide individuals towards realizing their full potential. Pauline's deep desire is to support others to blossom, and this is largely fueled by her personal healing journey. After she came back from two mental breakdowns sh- because where she hit rock bottom, she embarked on training as a coach and psychotherapist. And those lived experiences have added so much value, and we'll be hearing a bit more about her story today. So, Pauline has honed her focus to passionately drive positive change, whether that is for an organization or for an individual. And she firmly believes in the pursuit of becoming the highest and best version of yourself. So, we connected, is getting to a couple of months, almost a year now. We connected through a program, and it was all about being people who are like minded, who like to support people, who like to make a difference, and constantly holding ourselves accountable to do that and to develop and grow. And that is why I'm excited to be bringing her to you today to discuss this very important topic. So I want you to prepare to be inspired and equipped with the knowledge that will propel you forward to really become the best version of yourself. Get ready for this transformative conversation as I welcome to speak to you today, Pauline Toussaint. Welcome, Pauline.
Hi, Patience. How are you?
I am doing great, especially because you're joining me today, and we're going to have some wonderful, nice conversations. So, um, you know, I'll be talking about you and saying how we met and how much value you bring. But, it's up to you. We want to hear your story. We want to hear the journey that you made and how you became a psychotherapist and how you gained the passion to do what you're doing today.
Okay, thank you for the welcome, Patience. That's lovely. So obviously we're on our both on this journey. We met recently, like you said, about a year ago, coming up for a year. Both really passionate about change and helping people. So my journey to get to this point has been, I think you mentioned in my intro, I'd hit rock bottom twice. So if you go back to my childhood, I kind of like to take it there a little bit. My parents were part of the Windrush generation.
Mm,
And when they came to the UK, they were actually carrying their own traumas. And if you think of the child whose parents carrying their own traumas, they unconsciously pass that on to their children sometimes, unless they do the work, right? Unless they do their
mm,
own healing. And so I grew up in, I was, had experienced trauma in my own childhood. And when I got to the age of 20, I had my very first breakdown. I didn't know what was going on with me. My world just came crashing down. And I didn't really do any healing work at that time. I just carried on. And then I got to the age of 27. So I'd had two children by then. And I had my second breakdown. And again, my world came crashing down. But at this point, I'm a mother of two daughters. And it was that point that I recognized I had to make a change, because I couldn't, I couldn't go on to have a third breakdown. So I started on my own healing journey at that point. I had therapy. I've had a number of therapists that have helped me to heal from my past. And through that work, I kind of stepped into being a psychotherapist. It was never my goal. It was never my goal. I didn't, at the age of, I don't know, 12, 13, think I want to be a psychotherapist. I never, that was never it. But I just evolved because I was on this mission to heal myself. So I started off doing hypnotherapy. I did a hypnotherapy course because I wanted to get deep into my unconscious to really understand myself better. So through that was a year-long training. And then after the year, they said you can go on to do psychotherapy for another few years. So I had to make a decision, and I just thought, well, I'm just gonna go for it. I'm just gonna try it. But I didn't mention prior to that, I'm actually an accountant as well. So I was already an accountant, but the psychotherapy journey was through me trying to heal myself. And then I kind of, if you want to call it, fell into the psychotherapy. And through that work, I was able to not only work on myself, I now work with clients. And one of the highlights of my work is watching them transform. So that's why I'm known as a transformational coach as well. Because I see my clients come in one way, and over time, they transform into this new person. And the very first time I saw that, I thought it was really magical. So I really get so much energy seeing my clients change. I just love it. I'm feeling the energy of that now, because I just love that, doing the work. I kind of try to just, if I had a name for myself, I'd be saying, do the work, do the work.
Yes, and you're right about doing the work. And when you were last week, I sent an email to my subscribers, and in there I put in a quote, and it kind of relates to what you've just said, because you talk about two mental breakdowns, and the quote says, "Perhaps you were assigned this mountain to show others that it can be moved." So,
Sure.
when you were saying, as a child, I never thought of being a psychotherapist. If you had asked me who a coach is or what coaches do, I would have
Mhm.
said, Not sure. I only
Mhm.
wanted to be a doctor." And then I ended up, like yourself, doing accounting, and
Yeah.
then moved from accounting and realized that I'm a people person. So I started working in auditing, where I finished off before, jumping into the coaching world. And basically, going through our own traumas, going through our own challenges, we recognize that, somebody has helped us, and somebody has made a difference with whatever skills, talents, and then we think to ourselves, how can we make that difference to others? It's more like, I want to give back. And I can see that that's what gives you happiness and fulfillment, is when you are able to actually make a difference to people. So, and I always say that it's very important that I never waste my challenges in life, never. So that is a good thing, what you're doing. So
Yeah.
basically, we want to talk about, you did mention a little bit about, your parents, and then having an awareness that you were already carrying traumas as a child. And we know that there's a lot of talk around childhood innocence. But when we get older, that child is still part and parcel of us. So tell us a bit more about the inner child and why this really matters.
Yeah. So, in the beginning of my healing journey, I didn't really understand inner child. It was only until, a number of years ago that I started. One of my therapists was a play therapist, and he would use toys in our sessions. And I'd never had therapy like that before, but it was quite magical the way that he would get me to go and pick some toys, and then we would sit and we would talk about them. And that, one of the toys could be seen as one of my parents, the other toy could be seen as another parent. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And so through that work with my therapist, he said to me that you have to get to a point where you and your inner child are walking together, if that makes sense, side by side. And at the time, I was like, okay, that's interesting. Because what happens is when we go through that trauma, unless we heal that, so, and we don't heal it in childhood because children don't have the capacity to heal. They don't have the perspective. So children tend to blame themselves. You know, that's just what they do. So
Mm.
that's why, you know, children may, you know, you may come out of your childhood. One of my things was I wasn't good enough based on the sense that I made of my experiences. That was,
Mm.
you know, now looking back now, that wasn't my stuff. That wasn't mine to claim that I wasn't good enough, but that's what I carried because of my unhealed parts. So the work that I had to do, I had to go back and reconnect with my inner child. And what I did, I went and tried to remember all the things that I enjoyed doing as a child. So that was drawing. I loved to draw. I loved it the start of term because I'd get lots of, you know, colouring, like felt tips, you know, colouring pencils, and I would just colour. So that was one of my things. The other thing was I was very like physical. So I would run around a lot with my friends. We'd be out, we'd play games. So when I started reconnecting with my inner child, I kind of created what's called a scrapbook and just started adding in all of those things. And, you know, just bringing in all the images of my inner child, all the things that I did as, you know, a young girl. And at the time, I thought it was a bit strange that I was doing it, but it just felt like the right thing to do. And I didn't realize what I was then doing was reconnect with my inner child and really kind of getting to the point where I was walking side by side with my inner child. And for me, that's what that has done for me. It's created stability for me. And what I also do, I go back. So the part when I said that one of the things that came out of my childhood was that me not feeling good enough, I went back to that part of myself and I, you know, got to a point where I said to my inner child, thank you for carrying this for me. You
Mm.
don't need to carry it anymore. I'm going to take it over. I want you to have fun. I want you to be in joy. And because I have a relationship with my inner child, and it, you know, some people may think this is a bit weird, but it all happens, you know, in your mind unconsciously. So my
Mm.
inner child was able to just hand it on to me. And I said I would carry that because I know that my inner child doesn't need to carry that anymore. So I've been able to get to a point where that's just put down, it's cleared through that work. But I believe that
Mm.
obviously the work that I've done leading up to that, I've built this connection with my inner child. So it's things like that. The parts of me that made me feel unsettled, I go back, I connect with my inner child, I connect with the part of me who are feeling those beliefs or believing certain things, and I connect with them and say, thank you. I thank them for carrying it because they carried it for a reason, right? They didn't just pick it
Yeah.
up. They carried it for a reason. And I said, I thank them and say, you know, you don't need to carry it anymore. You know, I'm kind of
Mm.
releasing my inner child to just do what she was meant to do as a child, have fun, be in joy,
Yeah.
play, you know, all of that stuff. So yeah, that's kind of like why it's important that we do the work because unless we do, all these unhealed parts are kind of still in us.
Mm.
And we kind of wonder why we have limiting beliefs. Those limiting beliefs are there because there's a part of us that's still carrying those things. If that makes
Mm.
sense. Yeah.
I think it's interesting, just reiterating some of the things you've said about what is the inner child? Who is the inner child? And I think first and foremost, um, out of what you said is the fact that the inner child is a part and parcel of who you are, is
Yeah.
who you still are trying to um, maybe connect with in a way that you can understand your origins and your foundations and where you have come from. And also, I have had this experience of um, doing some work in therapy over the years myself, just because I felt like there was something that needed to be fixed.
Right.
Because when I looked around or on the surface, it felt a bit like, oh, things should be okay. I don't think I
Mm.
had that terrible a childhood. And my family and my parents did the best they could with what they had. So why am I constantly feeling lack of love and that inadequacy? And so my journey into therapy was similar. And then
Yeah.
when my mom died, there was another element of needing to heal from the trauma of losing my parent. And
Right.
it
Yeah.
really was an interesting thing that you talked about the playfulness, because
Yeah.
I noticed that the therapist involved a lot of playfulness stuff and releasing yourself. And I think one of the key things for me as a child was I didn't grow up in an environment where yes was very strong, no was a very strong thing,
Right.
and so
Yeah.
there was things around permission. And so part of the things that my therapist was saying then after mom died, she said, go out there to Tesco, pick up a trolley, put one foot on it and go wee across the aisles. And I thought people will say this grown crazy woman. But she said, do
Wow.
that and keep releasing yourself. That's part of how you say yes to yourself for something that looks rebellious. But another thing, that because we're on a show that talks about introverts and extroverts, a lot of time introverts have this identity crisis when they're younger, because people say you need to be talking, you need to be dancing, you need to be doing this, and you kind of carry a certain sense of rejection within yourself. You kind of think, I'm not sure I like myself because I'm not this bubbly person, and at the same time you're thinking, I really want to be who I am. I
Yeah.
don't want to dance. Like when my mom would say, why aren't you going to the party, or why aren't you, and I'll be like, I really don't, I just want to sit and watch people.
Yeah.
That's fun. But
Yeah.
that wasn't acceptable. And I think that whether we like it or not, there's some form of beliefs, some form of limitations that maybe that builds
Yeah.
into you. And for me, I felt like in 2020, when I decided to work with introverts, I felt like my inner child was saying, be us, really
Yeah.
become us and carry us along, and make us proud to be ourselves, who we are. It's time for us to say, yeah, it's fine for me to sit down and be quiet, it's fine for me to and that was kind of the turning point. So but then, based on that, I'm asking this question: do you think that introverts have more trauma that comes from inner child or childhood challenges than extroverts, or is similar? Is there any difference because of personality?
I think initially, because I'm an introvert myself, so I was kind of looking at it based on my perspective. And, what you said about, that acceptance in childhood where your parents are trying to make you something that you're not. So then you kind of believe that you're not, what's wrong with me? I see it in my client work. Clients find it hard to accept themselves because their parents wanted them to be something else in their
Mm,
childhood. So that whole acceptance. So I think that's where the introverts, may then come into adulthood with this like, oh, am I okay? That questioning of self. I
mm,
don't, I think maybe both can experience trauma, but they just process it differently.
mm,
Introverts are more, inward, aren't they? So they're going to be thinking more deeply about their issues, which can be a good thing. But then if they start overthinking things, that's not a good thing for them. Like, so that can, so they're more in tune to their inner child as well. Like, whereas an extrovert, they're outgoing, they're outside, so they may not even look inward. They may just overlook themselves, and
mm,
their inner child could be there because one of the things is like the inner child is sometimes screaming at us, saying, "I'm
mm,
not okay," but we sometimes overlook that inner child because we may have lots to do, or we may just not want to deal with it, right? So I
mm,
believe that extroverts, they will process it differently, whereas the introvert is more inward. That's a good thing on one hand, but on the other hand, it may not be such a good thing as well. So
mm,
those are the two differences. I'm just trying to think what else. Like, again, the introverts as well, we can be, because we are inward, so we like to be us, be on our own. That's where we get our energy from, right? um Again, that can be a good thing because we're getting energy, but if that tips over a bit, we may not reach out for help.
Mm.
We may just keep to ourselves, and then that kind of is not good for us. Whereas
Yeah.
the extroverts out there, you know, connecting,
Outgoing. Mm.
but they could be also ignoring the inner child as well. So,
Mm.
I
I think
think
it's about masking, isn't it? When you're talking, so the introvert masks through quietness, the extrovert mask through noise.
that's right.
Um,
Yeah,
and basically, maybe the extroverts have the ability to be more expressive in a way that brings out the playfulness of
yeah,
childhood or being an inner child than an introvert. And an introvert needs to learn that more, because then when you internalize, you tend to retain and withhold things. And so being able to be more expressive allows you to, so it might look therefore that what you're not releasing, you're carrying. Yeah. And that is, and so might be more heavy. And that's
yes,
why they say perhaps introverts, there is a type of introvert, obviously, the anxious introvert. And the anxious introvert will be anxious, especially if what's going on in within internally and
yeah,
childhood things that you haven't let go of or you haven't addressed.
yeah,
You might have fears that have been developed from childhood and you haven't learned to address them, and
yeah,
you're still not addressing them so that you can adapt and move forward in an extroverted world. And part of the anxiety would be the need for conformity
yeah,
that you've always had to have as a child,
yeah,
and that then carries on into adulthood. So, yeah, I guess when we think about um, extrovert versus introvert, either way, one of the things I like when I was much younger, there's a scripture that says in the Bible, it talks about the fact that except you accept the kingdom like a child,
right.
you will
Yeah,
not inherit, except you have faith and you see things like a child, you would not be able to accept or enter the kingdom of God. And
right,
when I think about that, I used to say that my inner child, I think about myself like when I first started having spiritual conversations was when I was 9 years old. So I
right.
go back
Yeah,
to my 9-year-old self
yeah,
and I say she's the wisest part of me, because the kind of conversations she was having with God,
yeah,
she directed my pathway to live the life I'm living right now,
yeah,
despite doubt. And she was a courageous part of me. So
yeah,
I think to myself that as a child, I just didn't question a lot of things. I just made a deal with God and I accepted it and I walked that pathway. So I
yeah,
think one of the key things that maybe with a world that is constantly full of evil, constantly full of things, is gaining that innocence back, that freedom, maybe, would you say, that liberty to be, to do, to have more, because a child does not think about the limitations in that sense. And
yeah.
when they are burdened by limitations, something that gets messed up. So would you say that part of what helps introverts basically is or what helps generally with healing is to begin to be more expressive of freedom, in a sense?
Yeah, most definitely. I think it's about learning to be your authentic self because,
Mm,
introverts have had, a bad time in the world, I would say, because we've always been people have tried to put us in a box. I call myself an ambivert. So I'm a bit of both. Sometimes I
mm,
can be an introvert, sometimes I can be, a bit of an extrovert as well. And so, yeah, you kind of get boxed in. Like my old experiences in previous, when I've sort of been in the world of work, I always tried to be this extrovert who I wasn't. It wasn't
mm,
natural. Like I said, I'm a bit of both depending on what's going on in my life. And, I always didn't feel like I was enough again. That was another area that said, well, I'm not enough because I'm having to pretend to be someone that I'm not. And
mm,
that takes a lot of energy, like we are all individuals, we're all unique, and it's
mm,
about being our own selves, like just
mm,
finding a way just to be ourselves, just be true to ourselves. Like you said, that innocence, that freedom, that letting go, not feeling like you're having to carry a mask. You know, when we
mm,
think about in the workplace, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, like that, just being your authentic self, you
mm,
know, just be you. So I think that is really, really important. So embracing that authentic self. And
mm,
people can do that through doing their own healing work, right? You know, I loved what you were saying about your own healing journey, like what your therapist said about going to the supermarket. Like, I didn't know that about you, but I absolutely love that. That's what freedom's about, not
mm,
caring what other people think. And it is a journey, but I
mm,
used to spend a lot of my life caring about what other people thought of me. And it is only recently, but I've got to the point where I said, I can't believe that I've done that. I can't believe that. I've Because I've used what I thought other people thought of me to kind of guide my life.
mm,
And I've got to a point where I said, no more. I'm just going to do me. And it's the most liberating thing in the world. It's like taking the chains off, like, you know, putting them down and saying, no more. This is my time. So for introverts, it's about finding a way to be your true self. And
yeah.
sometimes you need to get a bit of support with that. You know, you had your therapy, you know, I had my own therapy. I work with clients to help them to do that as well.
Mm,
So finding a way to do that.
yeah.
Also, having more compassion for ourselves as well,
Mm,
because we spent a lot of time not having parents who may have been compassionate to us,
mm,
who would have said, just be you, you know, just be you, instead of like, why are you not out there with the rest of the extroverts? And, you know, why are you not being like this? Why are you
mm,
not being like that? So having that compassion for ourselves is a big thing when it comes to that as well. You know, so that's some
mm.
of the things that can really help.
Yeah, and I think, as you were talking, although we talk a lot about introverts here, and we talk about the extroversion bias that causes challenges, it also occurred to me that an extrovert brought up by introvert parents might have some challenges coming from the fact that, they're told, can you just be quiet for a second, or can you, sit down here? And they are forced
Yeah,
to adapt to a life of solitude because the parents are not up to doing. And so, both ways, there is kind of like, if you are saddled with one or the other, and
that's so
the
true.
problem is like, though, in general, what happens is when someone is outgoing, looking very assertive and confident, there's more likelihood that the parents will be like, yeah, my child is out there, I'm proud of my
Yeah,
child, they're
yeah,
go-getters. And then if you're like not answering in the class and so on, what's wrong with you? Joe Bloggs stood up and answered the questions in class, and you couldn't even mutter an answer.
yeah,
Whether they're introvert or extrovert, as parents, that would be the challenge. They'll be looking at the child and saying, and they might also, even when they're introverts, go, actually, I did this, it didn't help me. And coming from their own experience, they'll be trying to push you to be different because it didn't help them in their own world. They weren't also accepted, they weren't validated, they weren't recognized, and they had to battle through that. And part of the desire of a parent is to see their child better than them. So they would push you to not make
yeah,
their mistakes as they would think it is. But basically, at some point, what we have been lucky to do at this stages in our lives is, one, get therapy, which our parents didn't get, two,
that's
get
right. Yeah,
coaching, because that's the other thing. The coaching is what really then transforms you to look forward from being that child, or now being an adult, kind of operating more as an adult, which is looking more forward, carrying that child, like you said, side by side.
yeah,
So, it's been very useful what you've shared, and we would like to know whether you've talked about self-compassion,
yeah,
and I think self-love is so important, and
yeah,
that really was the key that helped me. And the way I expressed my standing on the trolley and
yeah,
running through Tesco's is in my loud colors and my loud dressings. Is more or less like, me, look at me, um, whereas before I would wear colors that would dim me or would hide me, and I'll
yeah,
find a corner. Now I'm doing things differently. That's how I'm beginning to express myself courageously. There's
yeah.
no more fear. But what are some of the maybe 3 to 5 tips that you might have for the audience to take away to think about when it comes to going through that process of identifying that they need to work on their inner child and going through the healing process, whether by themselves or,
Yeah.
through.
Yeah, I would always, when it comes to the inner child work, I would always recommend professional help, because
Mm,
if you start connecting with a part of you that's maybe traumatized,
mm,
you can then maybe imbalance yourself. And so I would always recommend, if you feel like you've had some sort of traumas, you want to do a bit more of a deeper work, I would get professional help based on that.
mm,
But once you're in that process, I would also just recommend doing the things that you love to do as a child, right? Just go back and just have fun, like, ride on a trolley, I love coloring. So
mm,
sometimes when I feel the need to do it, I just get my colors out and just do my coloring. Recently, I revisited my childhood area, but I know not everyone has the opportunity to do that. I walked around my old childhood school and all those
mm.
memories, and that's where I also reconnected. So it's about finding ways to reconnect with your inner child, because then your inner child's going to feel seen, feel valued, and then
Mm,
you're starting that process of walking with your inner child, because your inner child has to trust you. If you imagine it's a new relationship, because sometimes the inner child feels abandoned by us because we've just carried on, right? We've had the traumas, but we're trying to get away from them. We
yeah.
kind of just carried on, so that you need to build that relationship. But once you start building that relationship, it's about really listening to yourself internally, and
Mm,
just like, thinking, okay, yeah, I need to have a bit of time out, I need to connect, just doing those fun things, like, being a child again, so you know that you'll be reconnecting with your inner
mm,
child as well.
mm,
Some of the other things that really helped me was journaling as well.
mm,
Just, getting a journal and just staying on top of doing the work. By journaling, you're kind of getting things out. It's like a companion. So journaling is a really powerful tool just to help you to kind of gain that deeper understanding of yourself as
mm,
well. Um, and also seeing yourself as valuable, and that self acceptance, because, like we talked about, some of our parents weren't able to kind of give that to us. They wanted us to be different. And I loved what you said about, that was probably their experiences. So they were trying to make it different for you potentially. And also with extroverts, I've never thought of it in that way, that if they had two introverted parents, they were trying to put them in a box as well, right? So it's about, seeing yourself of value and just accepting yourself for who you are, right?
mm,
And you can definitely do that through doing your own personal development. So whether you're journaling, just building that better understanding of yourself. But if you want to go deeper, just getting more, getting therapy as well, or coaching,
yeah.
in that way, just getting someone on board. Because sometimes if we try to do it ourselves, it's so much more powerful to have someone there with
Mm,
us, because we
mm,
can't often see that perspective.
yeah.
Like, what I love about my clients, when we're doing the work together, I can bring in things that I've got that better understanding of their experiences of, to kind of help them with the work, which is really powerful as well. So I would
Mm,
definitely say that. So find a way to be your authentic self, see yourself as value, connect with your inner child and have fun, and ask for help. Don't do it alone.
yeah.
If you want to go quicker, I would say don't do it alone, but obviously it depends on the person.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are some of the
I
things
think
that I
it's
think would help.
so many useful stuff, like you talk about. The problem is when people take things and it becomes cliche, you kind of like, oh, I don't want to do it because everybody in the world is doing it. So journaling is a good one. And one of the things I used to keep a diary when I was much younger, and
Right.
I
Yeah.
wrote a lot in it. But I stopped writing after a while because I realized that I was capturing the negatives, I was
Right.
capturing the pains, and I was capturing
Right.
sad things. So
Right.
I stopped writing at that point. But then, as an adult, I began to think, how do I turn this around? So when I created my journal, for example, and I started
Yeah.
tuning back into writing, I was more thinking there were things that I started writing as an adult that then felt like a way to create something that I wanted to manifest, because I would
Right.
pick up my journal and I would read it and I would be like, whoo. tick, 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 like these things happen, So I started
Yeah.
becoming shocked by them, So I
Yeah.
then took that to another level, last year when I thought, how do I improve my performance and my productivity and my self awareness and my valuing myself and so on. That's where I created the Win Your Day journal because of that,
Wow.
because the reflections that take place within that process allows you to move forward, do the work and all those kind of things. So,
Yeah.
like you said, make sure that you get help, make sure
Yeah.
that you show yourself compassion, make sure
Yeah.
that you do things like journaling. If journaling is not your thing, some people told me, at the point where I was saying, oh, sometimes I don't want to write, they'll be like, take a recorder and talk into
Yes.
it. So
That.
that's
Yeah.
itself is like an audio journal. So
Yes.
whatever
That's
you
right.
do, that's part of a way, something maybe I've never mentioned was I used to do what people call soliloquizing. So talking to
Okay.
myself. And
Right.
sometimes it's when I'm in deep thought and I thought those thoughts used to be negative, and I
Mm.
would say them out loud and I would say those thoughts and then I'll look, ooh, nobody's listening, are they?
Right.
But then I started transforming it through my healing journey. I started transforming it into when I want to talk to myself, I actually sing to myself. And I
Oh
used to
wow.
sing gospel songs that had inspiration, that had encouragement,
Right.
and it would be uplifting and it would flood my body with the right positivity. And
Yeah.
so those are some of the things. And when you were talking about parents, I want to kind of, I know that some parents listen to this. As a parent, I always said to myself, part of why I went on my healing journey was to not transfer my trauma to my children.
Right.
And
Yeah.
knowing that it's so possible in the way you parent to actually do that. And even I scientifically read that even in the womb, parents can transfer that trauma already
Right.
because your child is a part of you, taking everything in your subconscious and all of that stuff. They could actually pick it up. So my reason for actually thinking, oh, nobody else was doing it, it felt like, oh, you're too weak,
Right.
you're shameful and going for it was I don't
Wow.
want my
Yeah.
children, the next generation, to have it. And I want a future. I want a life.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like you said, get help. Don't allow your ego stop you. If you're a parent, it's even vital because you have more than one person you're transforming, which is yourself and your children's lives because you parent them differently when you are more aware of yourself, when we give compassion to ourselves, we can give it to our children. We can do much better to other people. We can be better managers. Like I mentioned, you work with organizations or individuals. We can be better managers when the
Yeah.
inner work, that inner child that is not seeking ego, that is not maybe trying to bully.
That's
That looks like
true.
a childhood behavior, trying to bully
Yes.
others because you
That's
don't know
right.
how to get them to do stuff. That
Yeah.
looks like childish behavior. So ask yourself, do I need to heal my ego that is linked to my childhood somewhere, where people looked down on me and I don't and my best way of making this is to so that's all useful stuff. But you also talk about time, and I say to my clients, if you're 50 years old, your trauma is 50 years old.
Yeah.
I would
That's very
encourage you
true.
to give yourself, as part of compassion, time and space to heal. Don't be
That's
in a
right.
rush. And it might just instantaneously one day happen, uncover very much. So
Yeah,
these
definitely.
are useful, tips that you've given and also shared with us in terms of stories and the journeys and highlighting the element of we as individuals, the parents, the child, and all that stuff. So is there any resource, any quote, anything that you rely on a daily basis to keep you going, something interesting that you might want to share with the audience before we come to round it off?
Yeah, so through my journey, actually, through breakdowns and going through that challenging time, I recognized that I was a victim to my childhood, for a
Mm,
very long time. And now I've kind of turned it on its head, a bit like you with your journal. Like, you kind of like, how can I, that's quite negative.
Mm,
How can I turn it around? And so now I see every challenge as an opportunity to meet my next best self, but I
mm,
just need to do some work to get there. So it's
mm,
not like this challenge has been sent to break me.
mm.
This challenge has been sent for me to see my greatness. So that's kind of
Wow.
how that's how I see life now.
Mm,
And so if I get caught up in the victimhood, I'm able to start switching that around. Like, how, what do I need to do to kind of, and that's how I'm starting moving forward. And it's
mm,
helping me to move forward a lot quicker,
mm,
because I'm like focus forward, as opposed to why me,
mm.
why is this happening? That victimhood that doesn't give you any energy. So yeah, I'll leave with that. Let's, with the
That
people
is so
listening,
powerful. Yeah.
see every challenge as an opportunity to meet your next best self. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's yeah,
Yeah. Like I always said, I said it somewhere and someone said, write it down. Right. Challenges are chances for change. And like you said,
yeah,
such an opportunity. And isn't it exciting to say, oh, the next Pauline that is going to really be exciting and
yeah,
the best is
yeah.
going to take this challenge and make my, as they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
That's
uh,
very
you know,
true.
and Billy Ocean that says when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. But you
That's
get
true.
going, as you said, moving forward because of that resilience you're building through using challenges. So thank you
Yes.
for really that insight. And, you know, Pauline has shared with us a lot of things today that have been very valuable and very useful. And I think it's a blessing that she's on the show today. So thank you so much, Pauline, for coming. And remember to connect with her. On the show notes, you will have details of how you can connect with Pauline, and how you can, have conversations with her. And also make sure you share this episode with your friends as well, because I'm sure there are a lot of things that you can bless somebody with to get illumination and insights about why put up with something that you don't need to put up with when you can get help. And I think that's the most important thing. So thank you again, Pauline, for coming.
Thank you so much for having me, Patience. It's been a really great conversation, and I've learned so much more about you. I didn't realize how connected to your inner child you were,
Yeah.
which is great. But yeah, like, just to end, like, if we're able to do this type of work in the workplace, like you said, around the bullying or helping the introverted employees, that's also going to help organizations with their
Mm,
bottom line, because you're so much more productive
yeah,
when you're being yourself, as opposed to wearing a mask, not being yourself. It slows people down. So there's so much
indeed.
value that we can do for businesses as well, through this
Yes,
work.
yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for
Thank
that. And
you.
thank you for coming on the show. And I'm looking forward to people being able to listen to this and take a lot of nuggets from it. So, as we come to the end, as usual, we always leave with a quote. Already, I think the one Pauline has given, you're having extra doses today because Pauline has already given some. But I love this one, and it's so it's part of what I said in the middle, where I said that part of what we're seeking from the inner child is the expression of freedom, playfulness, and fun. And it says here, this quote says, I love fantasy, I love imagination. That's my inner child. And
Mm.
it's by Hannah John Kamen. So, these days you're imagining and people say, oh, daydreaming. Then they tell you again on the same side, visualize. So you think, I can't win. Visualization is just what children used to do. Imagination. So
Yes.
get
Yeah.
back there and tune into your inner child that likes fantasy, that likes imagination, and really enjoy, take the time to enjoy life. So, and we're so glad that you've joined us on this transformative, rich conversation today. So, if you're really ready to unlock those introvert strengths and you want to build your quiet confidence, why not hook up with me and find out more about how I can support you through that process? In fact, you can start the journey by getting rid of overwhelm, by trying to understand what is overwhelming you, what is really challenging your life. So get on to the show notes and you'll find a quiz. titled Navigate Overwhelm in Business Like Pro, and take that quiz and find out what areas are your challenges that you need to get rid of. So until next time, make sure that you stay quietly introverted. Thank you so much, Pauline, for coming.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Quietly Confident Introverts. If you found today's discussion valuable, please subscribe, rate, review, and share the podcast with others. You can also connect with me, Patience Ogunbona, at the Visionary Introverted Woman. Until next time, stay confidently introverted.